Have you ever heard of a tactic in sports so ruthless, so utterly dangerous, that it didn't just split the game wide open, it nearly severed the ties between two entire countries? Well, that's exactly what we're talking about today. It's a story about a plan born from pure desperation, carried out with chilling, military-like precision. This is the story of Bodyline.
Okay, so it all kicks off with this number, and you really have to let this sink in. 139.14. That was the unbelievable batting average of Australia's Don Bradman during the 1930 Ashes series. Now, to give you some context, that's not just good, it's godlike. He was this unstoppable run-scoring machine, and England had absolutely no idea how to deal with him.
You see, for the English cricket establishment, Bradman wasn't just a thorn in their side. He was a genuine threat to their very identity. This kid from the Australian bush was, all by himself, taking apart a game that England had invented, a game they had always dominated. The feeling back at Lord's, the heart of English cricket, was that they had to do something, and it had to be drastic.
And that was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? It was hanging over all of English cricket. Everything they tried, all the traditional tactics, had failed miserably. They needed a totally new plan. And more than that, they needed a new kind of captain to pull it off. A man who would do absolutely anything to win.
And the man they turned to was Douglas Jardine. The English Cricket Board gave him a very clear, very simple mission. Go to Australia, neutralize Don Bradman, and bring back the Ashes. And Jardine was, in pretty much every way you can imagine, the absolute polar opposite of the Australian hero he was sent to defeat.
I mean, just look at this comparison. The contrast is just incredible. Jardine was the very definition of the British Empire. Born in India to a colonial family, educated at the most elite schools in England, he was steeped in this culture of duty, of hierarchy. And Bradman, he was the total opposite. A working-class hero, a symbol of Australian grit. So this wasn't just two cricketers going at it. It was a clash of cultures, old empire versus the new world, played out on a 22-yard pitch.
You really have to understand where Jardine came from to get his mindset. He was shaped by this tough, almost Spartan upbringing in an English public school during World War I. For him, life was about duty and service, and sport was just an extension of that. It was basically a form of combat. He genuinely believed that to beat your opponent, you first had to hate them. This wasn't a game for him, it was war.
This quote is just so telling, isn't it? Even before the team set sail, the people who knew Jardine best were worried. His own coach basically predicted that Jardine's win-at-all-costs attitude could cause a huge mess, one that went way beyond the cricket field and could actually damage the relationship between Britain and Australia.
So what was this top-secret radical plan? How was Jardine going to solve the Bradman problem? Well, he'd been studying old newsreels of Bradman batting, and he spotted something. Just a tiny, almost invisible flinch whenever the ball flew up high towards his body. And for Jardine, that was it. That was the chink in the armor he was going to exploit.
Jardine called his plan fast leg theory. It was the Australian press, though, that gave it the much more sinister name we all know today, Bodyline. The idea was simple and it was brutal. It wasn't about trying to trick the batsman out with skill. Nope. It was all about raw physical intimidation.
And this breaks down exactly how it all worked. It was like a three-pronged attack. First, you needed terrifying speed, and England had Harold Larwood, a coal miner who was probably the fastest bowler on the planet. Second, the aim. Jardine told him to forget the stumps, pitch the ball short, and aim it right at the batsman's body. The goal was to make them panic. And third, the trap. He would crowd the leg side with fielders, just waiting for that panicked defensive flick of the bat. It was a cold, calculated system.
And this is where it gets really chilling. This quote just reveals the true nature of the whole plan. It was psychological warfare. Jardine thought he'd found a moral weakness in his rival, a flaw in his courage. He wasn't just trying to get Bradman out anymore, he was trying to break his will. On the boat over to Australia, he famously told his team that they were forbidden from even saying Bradman's name. From now on, he was only to be called the little bastard.
The tour started with the tension just bubbling under the surface, but when they got to the third test in Adelaide, the whole thing just exploded. Adelaide, which was usually known as this calm, peaceful cricket ground, was about to become an absolute battlefield. Okay, so picture this. The Australian captain, Bill Woodfull, a guy everyone respected, is at the crease. Harold Larwood fires in a delivery, traveling at well over 90 miles an hour. It hits Woodfull with the sickening thud right over his heart. He drops his bat, staggers away. He's in agony. The whole crowd just goes silent.
And then came the moment that turned shock into pure rage. As Woodfull is literally clutching his chest, trying to catch his breath, Jardine doesn't offer a word of sympathy. Instead, he turns to his bowler and shouts, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Well bowled, Harold." For the 50,000 fans watching, that was all the proof they needed. This wasn't a sport anymore. This was a deliberate assault.
And it just got worse. The Australian wicketkeeper, Bert Oldfield, got hit in the head. He went down, collapsed in a heap. His skull was fractured. The crowd just lost it. They started booing and screaming at every single thing the English players did. It got so bad that the police were put on standby, ready to charge the field, because they were terrified a full-blown riot was about to break out.
Later in the locker room, England's manager tried to go and apologize to Woodfull. But he was met with this stone-cold reply. Woodfull was a man of principle, and he truly believed England had just spat on the very spirit of the game. When that comment got leaked to the newspapers, it became the rallying cry for the entire country.
And that was the final straw. The Australian Cricket Board sent an official telegram to Lords in London, and they used the dirtiest word you could use back then, unsportsmanlike. All of a sudden, this wasn't just a cricket dispute anymore. This was a full-blown diplomatic crisis, threatening the relationship between the two nations.
But even with an international incident blowing up, Jardine absolutely refused to back down. He kept saying his tactics were perfectly legal, and he kept using them. And from a cold, hard, tactical point of view, it worked. But the victory felt hollow, and it came at a massive cost.
England won the series, and they won it easily, 4-1. They also achieved their main goal. Bradman's average was slashed to 56.57, which is still amazing, but for him, it was human. The problem was, when the team got back to England, the same establishment that quietly approved the plan now needed someone to blame. Jardine and his main weapon, Harold Larwood, were thrown to the wolves. Larwood refused to apologize, and he was never picked to play for England again.
So in the aftermath of all this chaos, the Bodyline series really forced the sport to take a long, hard look in the mirror. It had to ask itself some tough questions about the rules and really what the game was all about. It would change cricket forever, and it would change the legacies of the men at the center of it all. Feeling totally betrayed by the cricket authorities, Jardine just retired from Test cricket the next year. They changed the laws of the game to make sure tactics like Bodyline could never be used again. And then, in this really amazing final twist, Harold Larwood, the bowler who had terrorized Australia, ended up moving there in 1950. And he lived the rest of his life there and was warmly welcomed by the very people he once tormented.
But here's the thing. As time has passed, people's views have started to change. A lot of modern players, including legendary Australian captain Ian Chappell, have looked back at Jardine differently. They argue that he wasn't really a cheat. He was just a brilliant, ruthless tactician who found a loophole in the rules and exploited it to win.
So, when you boil it all down, who was Douglas Jardine? Well, he was a brilliant tactician obsessed with winning. He was a product of his time and his class. He was the mastermind behind Bodyline, the most controversial strategy in cricket history. And while he won the Ashes, it cost him his career and left him with this incredibly complicated legacy.
Which leaves us right here with the final question. Was Douglas Jardine a villain who betrayed the spirit of cricket, or was he a genius strategist who was just doing what any captain should do, playing to win within the rules as they were written? It's a debate that's still going on today, and honestly, that's what makes this whole story so fascinating.